My name is Marcy, and this story is mostly about my dad and the things our family has gone through. My dad is a big man. He stands at 6'5" and weighs just under 300 pounds. He's 50 years old. He's not and has never been overweight or flabby. He is solid as a rock. I remember while we were growing up, he would tell us to hit him in the stomach, and he would laugh when we hit him. By we, I mean me and my brother Robert. He was named after our dad. Dad was named William Robert Smith. As he was growing up, people would call him Bill for William and Bob for Robert, so his nickname was Billy Bob Smith. People are so original, aren't they? I'm mentioning this because it becomes important later in the story. So he named my brother Robert William Smith instead of Junior. Dad never cared for the name Junior. Robert is a pretty big guy also, but nowhere near as big as Dad. My mom, Marcia, and Dad met in high school. Mom was the cheerleader and Dad was the defensive and offensive lineman. They began dating their junior year. Mom always thought that Dad would become famous and make it as a pro football player, but he decided he didn't want to go to college. Mom was mad at him for not even trying. "I'm happy with what I want to do in life," he explained to her. My grandfather owned a large independent grocery store, and Dad was a meat cutter there. He also knew that someday the business would be turned over to him. Mom stayed with Dad, and they got married shortly after graduation. Less than a year later, I appeared, and another year later, they had Robert. Mom thought 2 kids were enough and had her tubes tied. Dad loved kids, but he said it was his wife's choice. A lot of people were a bit scared of Dad until they got to know him. To us kids and our friends, we all considered him a big teddy bear. He really was a gentle giant. We had a good life. Mom worked at the store as a cashier part-time after Bob and I started school. I believe she always had dreams of becoming famous, or at least meeting famous people. Dad loved her and gave her everything she ever asked for. I never heard him raise his voice to her, but she would get mad at him. It was always about something he didn't do or somewhere he wouldn't take her. He usually gave in eventually. The store was open 7 days a week, and Dad worked most of them. But if we ever had a game or something going on at school, Mom and Dad would always be there for us. The holidays were great. On Christmas morning, we would all gather around our tree and take turns opening presents. There were very few things we did without. Most every year, Dad would buy Mom a couple of tickets to a big-time play or show she said she just had to see. Most of them were in the large city 50 miles away, and Mom would often go with her friends since Dad would probably be working. She did go to a couple of football games and even a hockey game with Dad, but she preferred the bright lights of musical and Broadway-type shows. They weren't Dad's thing. When we were old enough, Grandpa would give us jobs to do in the store and pay us. It made us feel important. When we told Mom we wanted to own our own store when we got older, she about hit the roof. "I want so much more for you," she said. "You should go to college." "We plan on going to college to learn bookkeeping and get a degree in business administration," we told her. "It will help us run our own businesses." Dad kept quiet about it and said, "Whatever you want to do, I'll be behind you." I had just started college, and Bob would be going the following year. Dad already had the money set aside for us to go. It was then that our lives changed forever. Mom was getting mad all the time and said she was tired of working at the store and was going to start going out with her girlfriends. "Since you bowl every Friday, I'm going out with my girlfriends," she told Dad. "I'm not going to stay home alone." Dad never denied her anything, and she had gone out often with her friends. We owned and lived in a 4-unit apartment right next door to the store. Dad rented out 2 units, and we lived in the other 2. Bob and I lived together in 1 unit. It was rent-free as long as we took care of it. We each had our own bedroom, but Dad said we had to keep the place clean or he wouldn't let us live there. We felt so independent even with our parents just 30 feet away. We were allowed friends over, but Dad let us know that if we brought in alcohol or drugs, he would not be Mr. Nice Guy. We had a few friends who thought they would bypass Dad's rules. Big mistake. Dad grabbed them bodily and threw them out in the front yard, back to Mom and her going out. Dad didn't notice, but Mom was really dressing up to go out with her two friends, Lucille and Betty. What bothered me is that they were both divorced. I didn't see the need for Mom to get all dolled up. I mentioned it to Mom, and she told me, "They're my friends and I enjoy their company." I wasn't sure whether to mention it to Dad, but he usually knew what was going on around him. I was in college, but it was in town, so I came home in the evenings and noticed Mom was pretty intoxicated when she came home from being with her friends. Dad was usually asleep when Mom got home. I mentioned it to him one day. "I'll watch out for her," he said. The following week, Mom came home drunk again. When I told Dad, he said he would take care of it. He never raised his voice to Mom, but did tell her she should be drinking a little less. "I'm a big girl and can take care of myself," Mom told Dad. Dad told me he wrote it up to her going through her change of life, but he would be watching her much closer. The following week, he didn't go bowling, but decided to follow Mom. "I've never done this before and don't feel right doing it," he told me. "I've always trusted her." From the perspective of Billy Bob. My friends have called me Billy Bob ever since I was a kid. It stuck, and I still used it among friends. Marcia just called me Bill. As Marcy has told you, Marcia and I were high school sweethearts and have been together since our junior year in high school. I always wanted to walk in my dad's footsteps and enjoyed the grocery business. I knew I was big, and to stay in shape I lifted weights 3 times a week. I didn't want the muscle to turn to flab. Marcia seemed to always want more out of life. I think she watched too many Real Housewife programs. That wasn't real life. What we had was real life. Family who did things together and good friends who we could trust. We worked and we played. Marcia and I had a good relationship. She never complained, so I figured all was well. I got a bit worried when Marcy told me about her mother coming home drunk. I bowled on Fridays, had a few beers, and came home and went to sleep. I was always up early Saturday morning to work at the store. I never bothered Marcia. The following Friday, I followed Marcia and her 2 girlfriends to a bar. It was a hangout for more of a mobster-type crowd. I knew the area well. This shouldn't be the type of place my Marcia should be hanging out. I would have to talk to her about it later. This place would be nothing but trouble. I paid the $20 cover charge and went up on the second-floor balcony to watch all the goings-on. There were dancers performing on stage. I saw Marcia and her 2 girlfriends drinking it up. Eventually, the women were greeted by 3 men in suits. I knew right off that they were mob people. I could tell this wasn't the first time that they all had met. The women got up and started dancing with these men. I didn't care at all for the liberties this one jerk was taking with Marcia. When the music stopped, I decided to go downstairs and put a stop to it. As I was going to the staircase, I saw Marcia and the man she was with getting up and heading out a back door. By the time I got downstairs, they were already outside. "That door is an emergency exit only," the bouncer told me. "You have to use the front door." I thought about pushing him aside and using it anyway, but he was just doing his job. I guess the man Marcia left with had some special rights. By the time I got to my car in the lot, I could see one car pulling out. It must be the one that Marcia was in. I stayed back, hoping that they didn't know I was following them. It was a Lexus, and an easy car to follow. My worst thoughts came into my mind when I saw them pull into a motel. I drove on by and turned around and came back. I saw them entering room 107 on the first floor. It had an outside entrance. It was Marcia entering the room. Why would she come here with this lowlife? I was getting madder by the minute, trying to formulate a plan. After about 15 minutes, I stormed up to the door and with all my weight kicked it in. There was Marcia with this man being unfaithful to me. Needless to say, the door being busted open and me walking in pretty much stopped them. "Oh my God! Bill!" Marcia screamed. The man on top of her reached for his gun on the nightstand. I took a couple of quick steps and knocked the gun from the man's grasp. I picked him up by his neck and threw him up against the wall. I didn't stop there as I picked him up about 3 inches off the ground and put my hand around his throat. He tried to struggle free, but I held him firmly until he went limp. I let him fall to the floor. I looked over at Marcia, who was in tears. Get dressed, I told her. The police will be here soon. I picked up the phone and dialed 911, switching to the perspective of Marcy. Dad was never much of a talker, but he called me and told me he had just killed a man. I couldn't believe it. You need to hold it together for your mother, he told me. She's in a state of panic and shock. I need you to pick up your mother later at the police station. There's nothing else I can tell you now. I was a mess. I called Grandpa and told him what Dad had said. I got hold of my brother Bob and he went to the police station with me. Mom did nothing but cry. I was so stupid, she kept saying. This is all my fault. A detective took me and Bob aside and told us what my father had said. The district attorney would be in to see what charges would be filed against my father. Who was the man he is accused of killing? I asked. Lee Fazio, the detective told us. He was a mob boss's brother. His brother Romeo was somewhat of the kingpin in the area. This brother was in charge of the trash haulers industry and was presumed to be a drug kingpin, except they were never able to pin anything on him. Romeo has already gone to the district attorney and demanded the death penalty for the death of his brother, the detective continued. Luckily, he doesn't have the district attorney in his pocket. We weren't able to see Dad before the trial. It went rather quickly. Mom had pretty much verified what Dad had said. She made a huge mistake and was unfaithful with Lee Fazio. It wasn't her first time, but now she totally regretted it. She told the district attorney that Dad busted into the room and Lee reached for his gun. Before he could get a shot off, Dad did knock it out of his hand. Dad didn't stop there as he picked up Lee Fazio and choked him to death. It was the last time my dad ever spoke to my mother. Because of the breaking and entering, he had to be charged with something. Dad's attorney said that Lee Fazio pulled a gun on him. Dad was protecting himself. It was self-defense. The jury came back with guilty of involuntary manslaughter since Dad had never had or used a weapon other than his hands. He was sentenced to 5 years in the state penitentiary. The Fazio family was outraged as they walked out of the courtroom. Romeo Fazio said it wasn't over. Dad just looked over at Mom as he was taken out of the courtroom in handcuffs. She was crying, as were the rest of us. He never spoke to her again. He told me he didn't want her coming to the prison. She would not be listed on the permitted visitors list. Someone in our family went to see Dad each month. He always told us to bring candy bars and cartons of cigarettes. I asked him if he took up smoking, but he said it was for a few of the friends he had made. Bob had asked Dad if his life was hard in prison and did he get in much trouble. I let people know I wasn't going to take their nonsense, Dad told him. After knocking a few guys around, I was pretty much left alone, other than a few friends. He said one time he was warned by a buddy that one man was going to stab him in his kidney area at lunchtime. He had beaten up the guy pretty bad, and the guy was in the hospital ward for 2 weeks. Dad put a book under his jumpsuit to protect his kidneys after that. The criminal who Dad felt was hired by Romeo Fazio came up behind him and jammed the knife into his kidney area, but caught the book instead. Dad swung around with his elbow and broke the creep's jaw. By then, the guards were there and saw the knife sticking out of the book. The creep had passed out, but his jaw looked terrible. He was back in the hospital ward with another 10 years added to his sentence for attempted murder. Dad said the man's jaw was never the same. He could hardly talk, but stayed away from Dad. Something terrible happened shortly after the incident. Mom would hardly talk to anyone. She did talk to me and Bob, but it was always about what a wonderful man Dad was and how stupid she was. One day, Bob and I were at school, and when we got home, Mom was dead, lying on her bed. Next to her were some kind of drugs. Her name wasn't even on the bottle. We called the police, and they sent a crime scene specialist for fingerprints and anything else they might find. They ruled it as a drug overdose and possible suicide. Bob and I cried and went to see Dad. When he heard the story, he had tears in his eyes. It was the first time we ever saw our dad cry. Marcia was too strong-willed a woman to take her own life, he told us. Someday the truth will come out. After Mom's funeral, we hardly ever saw our grandparents on Mom's side. For some reason, they blamed Dad for Mom's death. It was now 3 years later, and Dad was up for early parole. Grandpa was there to let the parole board know Dad still had his job waiting for him. His apartments were also kept up, so he had a place to live. Other than the few run-ins when he first went to prison, he was considered a model prisoner and was released. We had a party for him at the house. We made sure that anything that belonged to Mom was now gone. We did keep pictures and a few keepsakes that we stored in the basement that Dad might want later. Dad had so many friends that came and saw him. Dad never spoke much, but his friends and family knew he was thankful that they all were there. "How's school?" he asked me and Bob. "We both have degrees in business management," we told him. "Right now, we both work helping Grandpa with the store." It was funny how many law enforcement officers were Dad's friends. Many have been his friends since high school. Dad did ask a couple of them about Romeo Fazio, but they said he was still in operation. He had other people doing his dirty work. They hoped to catch him someday. Dad and Grandpa had a meeting together. "I want to open 2 new stores," Grandpa said. "Bob and Marcy are doing great in the business. There's no way we can all make a good living at just the one store." Grandpa called Bob and me in. "Do you really want to be in the independent grocery business?" he asked us. "We do," we both told him. "We're opening 2 new stores," Dad told us. "You each will be managing one of them." We were so excited. It was what we always wanted, to follow in our father's footsteps. Mom, bless her soul, could never understand it. I guess it was in our blood. In the next year, we found 2 locations, and Grandpa and Dad were getting them ready. I was soon in my own store, or at least managing it, and Bob was managing his. All 3 stores were in a 30-mile radius, so we could see each other often. Bob and I had to find other places to live, close to our stores. It was different having to pay rent, but we were making good salaries now. One thing that I forgot to mention, but Dad knew, I was engaged to a wonderful man who worked in law enforcement. Dad thought it was funny when I first told him. We will be getting married in October. Bob was going with one of his new cashiers. They were going together, but no dates were set yet. If it all worked out, they were hoping for next year. Things were going well for us now. One thing that Dad did was hire a few of the men he met in prison. At first, we wondered about a few of them, but Dad told us he trusted them. "They all made mistakes and paid for them," he said. "They have families and need a new start." If Dad trusted them, so would we. He trained most of them as meat cutters. Dad was one of the best butchers around. He never lost his touch while in prison. I heard a few of the men tell Dad that they would never let him down. If he ever needed anything, he could depend on them. Grandpa was about ready to semi-retire, and Dad would be taking over the store management at our main store. Grandpa would just make rounds and come see us at the stores. We knew he could never completely leave his business. Dad also said that our head bookkeeper would be retiring also. "Run an ad and get us a good bookkeeper," he told me. "I'd prefer one that could also be our accountant. Running our stores is too much for Bob or you to be accountant for the whole operation as well. The salary will depend on ability." He wanted Bob and me to do the screening and interviews and get it down to maybe 5 people, and he would make the final decision. I couldn't believe how many applications we received. There must have been over 100. We started going through them and did like Dad wanted. We made a special list for those who could do accounting and taxes, not just bookkeeping. After we finally narrowed it down to 5 people, we interviewed each one. 3 I didn't much care for because of their cockiness. They were overeducated and made it clear they were. I knew that wouldn't sit well with Dad. Out of the 2 we had left, one was a woman and the other a man. I sent both of them to be interviewed by my father. The man seemed intimidated by Dad's size. Dad no longer went by Billy Bob since he got out of prison. He now went by William Smith. I told Dad that there was something about the woman. I really liked her, but she seemed overqualified for the position. When I called her former employers, I was told she did excellent work, but had to be let go for personal reasons. No one would say what her problems were. Dad decided to interview the woman. Her name was Mary Bernheimer. Dad speaks again. Ms. Bernheimer, your qualifications seem to far exceed what we are looking for. Would you care to explain why you applied? I asked. Well, Mr. Smith, I had broken up with my boyfriend, even though I prefer not to call him that, Mary explained. He said that no matter where I went, he would see to it that I didn't get hired. I've been to every financial institution in the city, and I've been turned down by everyone. I have a master's degree in accounting and have been doing taxes for companies for over 15 years. Why were you let go from the People's Bank if they had no problem with you? I asked. It's rather personal, but my ex-boyfriend beat up the manager, and then I was fired, she admitted. I'm sorry, I should probably leave. I'm sure someone will be here soon to tell you not to hire me anyway. I'm sorry for wasting your time. She went to get up, and I asked her to wait in our other office. Something wasn't right here. This woman was very attractive, probably around 40 and exceptionally intelligent. I wanted to know what the problem was here. About that time, Marcy told me that Stan Folkert wanted to speak to me. He came into my office, and I asked him what I could do for him. At first, he seemed surprised that I was a large man. Mr. Smith, I'm here to do you a great favor, he said. A woman by the name of Mary Bernheimer will probably be here to interview for a position in accounting. My client has had a number of problems with her, and I'm here to tell you that it is in your best interest not to hire this woman. I already disliked this guy. I thought I'd play along with him till I got bored. So, is her work less than acceptable? I asked. According to our records, she has been an exemplary employee till she was let go from her last employer. What can you tell us about her or the client you represent? I'm sorry, but all our information is confidential, he replied. You come into my business and try and tell me who I can and cannot hire, I said angrily. Get out of my office before I have you thrown out. If I ever see you around here again or near Ms. Bernheimer, I'll see that both of your arms and kneecaps are broken. You are making a very grave mistake, Mr. Smith, he warned. My loud talking brought both Marcy and my butcher Bruce into the office. I asked Marcy to escort Mary into the room. Mary, do you know this man? I asked. Yes, he's an attorney for Romeo Fazio, my ex-so-called boyfriend, she replied. Stan started to put his hand near his jacket. If you're going for a gun, Bruce will have a meat cleaver in the back of your head in 3 seconds, I warned. Take it out slowly and place it on my desk, then turn around, get yourself out of here, and tell your boss not to send a boy to do a man's job. You're making a gigantic mistake, Mr. Smith, Stan said. She isn't worth it. Do you have any idea who Romeo Fazio is? Sure I do. When you see him, tell him Billy Bob Smith will be waiting for him. Stan must have recognized my name and went pale as he left the store. I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. I should have known better than to apply for a job anywhere, Mary said. I put people in danger. I sent Bruce back to the meat department and thanked him for having my back. Anytime, boss, he replied. I had Marcy and Mary sit down. Mary, I plan on hiring you, but you have to be totally honest with me, I said. If I find out you're lying, we can't help you. Are you really the Billy Bob Smith that killed Lee Fazio? She asked. Yes, it was me. But that was a long time ago, I replied. I need to know what we're facing now. Please start from the beginning. I met Romeo about 8 years ago, Mary began. I never had dated much, and one day he approached me at the bank and asked me out. I knew he had a bad boy reputation, but every woman thinks she can change that. On our first date, we were intimate. He kind of forced me, but I didn't put up the biggest fight. He started seeing me regularly, and we always went out to nice restaurants for dinner, and he would buy me things. I thought he really liked me, but he was just using me like he did a number of women. When I told him I didn't want to see him anymore, he laughed at me. No woman has a choice of leaving me, he said. You'll be mine till I throw you out. I got pregnant with our first child. Now I knew I couldn't just leave him. My best days were when he just left me alone. Shortly after my son was born, I was pregnant again with a girl. He laughed and told me how potent he was. I worked during the day and took care of my babies in the evening. We didn't want for anything. I made enough money to support my kids. When they were 3 and 4 years old, I took them and tried to run away. He found me and beat me. He said the next time I tried that, he would kill my babies." Mary was crying at this point. We stopped for a few minutes, and Marcy got us all some coffee. I had to feel sorry for this woman. Someone had to stop that jerk. I still wondered if he had anything to do with my wife's death. I still didn't believe she committed suicide. Mary continued on with her story. "I was taking birth control pills so I wouldn't have any more kids, but didn't tell Romeo. I had to hide them. One day I talked with my boss at the office. His name was Tom Banks. Romeo found out we had dinner together and called me terrible names. He beat up Tom really bad. We were just having dinner after doing an inventory. Romeo wouldn't believe me. He took me to his club and let all his friends take advantage of me. I went along because I knew he would beat me if I didn't. Afterward, he told me I earned my freedom and to get out. The next day, when I went to work, I found out I was let go. I went to pick my kids up at daycare and was told their father picked them up. I called Romeo, and he said I couldn't have the kids. 'You're an unfit mother, and I have the pictures to prove it,' he said. He had taken them at the club. He put my kids in a boarding school. I went to a judge and he said I could see the kids every other Sunday, but they couldn't leave the facility. I tried to fight it, but I had no job and had to give up my condo and find a cheap apartment. I made sure I was there every other Sunday to see my kids. I miss them, and I know they miss me. This rest of the story you already know." "Mary, one more question," I said. "Did he ever talk about the death of my wife?" "He once told me that if I caused him any more trouble, that I would end up the same way your wife did," Mary answered. "I wasn't sure what he meant because I would never commit suicide as long as my kids were alive." "Mary, you got the job, and you can start tomorrow," I told her. She thanked me and even gave me a hug. After she left, Marcy asked if we were doing the right thing. "If we don't help Mary, who will?" I replied. She gave me a hug and a smile. Marcy and Bob were both back running their stores. They were told to watch out for anything that didn't seem right. Mary was working at my store, so I figured if there were any problems, it would happen here. She was so smart. She had no trouble at all using our computers and updating many of our files. I stopped in her office, and she mentioned a few ideas that would make posting much easier. Before we knew it, it was time to close shop. I asked Mary if she would like to stop next door at the restaurant and get a bite to eat. She told me she was really hungry, so we had dinner together. I asked her if she would be all right going home by herself, and she said she thought she would. Things were normal for about 2 weeks. Then one day, Mary left the store and called me to tell me her apartment was on fire when she got there. I rushed over, and the fire department was still there. The chief, who was a friend of mine, told me that someone left a skillet on the burner and didn't turn it off. I went to mention it to Mary, and she told me she hasn't used the stove in 3 days. Someone else started the fire. I told it to the chief, and he said it couldn't be proven who might have started it. Most of the damage was in the kitchen area. "Bill, we had to break down the front door to get in and put out the fire," the chief explained. "We would have no way of knowing if someone was here before us. We'll have to list it as an accident. I'm sorry." Mary was crying. "When is it going to stop? Why won't he just give me my kids and leave me alone? Where am I supposed to live now? Most of my personal things are no longer any good." I hugged her. It isn't something I normally do, especially with employees, but this was an exception. "Mary, everything will be okay. I'm here to help you," I assured her. "I don't have anywhere to go. I've lost most of my belongings. I don't know which way to turn," she said. "Mary, come home with me. I have an extra apartment since the kids moved out. You can stay there. Tomorrow we'll come and see if we can salvage anything. Believe me, I won't let anyone hurt you." I called Marcy and told her what had happened and that I was going to let Mary stay in her old apartment. Marcy was worried for her also. She told me she would take her shopping the next day and pick up some personal things. My kids are the best. I knew I had to develop a plan to take care of this jerk once and for all. I didn't want to go back to prison, but I would if I had to. Mary moved into the apartment across from me, and she and Marcy did go shopping and pick up some personal items and a few changes of clothes. The next day we went back and salvaged whatever we could of her things. Mary and I ate dinner at a restaurant, or she would make me dinner at her or my apartment. Bob and Marcy stopped by our store every couple of days to make sure everything was okay. We hadn't had any problems in over a month. I was beginning to really like Mary. I wasn't the type of person to show a lot of outward affection, but I believe Mary could tell how I felt. I was sure Marcy and Bob knew it too. They were always able to see changes in me. I also knew Romeo wouldn't give up that easy. He was the type to lull a person and then strike back. I figured I'd play his game. I had old friends that I trusted to keep an eye out for anyone seeming suspicious. They knew what to look for. I wanted to make sure my family was protected as well as Mary. It was now October, and Marcy was planning her wedding. We had a couple of weeks to go. Since her fiancé Lance was a cop, we had a lot of extra cruisers touring our parking lots. If they would come in, we always offered free coffee and donuts. Our stores would be closing early that day so all our employees could attend the wedding and reception. I wanted the best for Marcy. Mary would be going with me. She has told me she felt safe with me around. I made sure that I had lookouts at each store for the night. It would have been a good time to set some kind of trap. We didn't worry about trouble at the wedding since we had half the police force in attendance for Lance. The wedding was beautiful. Marcy looked like my little angel as I walked her down the aisle. It brought tears to my eyes even though I felt like an overgrown penguin in the tux. All in all, I made it through the wedding, and it was fantastic. At the reception, I removed my jacket and felt much better. I danced with my beautiful daughter, and it brought tears to my eyes. She looked a lot like her mother. These were the events that family should be together. I danced with Mary. We had been close a few times, but tried not to show our relationship in public. I couldn't hide it from Marcy. That girl knew me like a book. She just told me to be careful, and I always had her blessing. She and Mary got along fine. Near the end of the reception, I got a call. One of my lookouts found a man planting a bomb under one of my delivery trucks. It was the one I often drove and left it parked in the back of the lot. The man was on his back and caught in the act. I told my lookout, who had a gun pointed to the bomber's head, to ask him who he worked for. "Romeo Fazio," the man said. "He's paying me $10,000 to set the bomb." I told my lookout to walk back to the store and to take the remote with him. When he was a safe distance away, to push the button. A few minutes later, I heard a large noise. I was standing next to the chief of police when my cell phone rang. I told him I had a lookout at each store and one just called and said someone just blew up my delivery truck. He was going out to see if he could find out anything. The chief had me call him back and tell him to stay inside the store till the police arrived. I did as I was asked. The chief made a couple of calls and said he would get back to me. I told him the wedding reception was about over, and I didn't want to ruin my daughter's special day. He understood. I mentioned it to Bob so he would be aware. Marcy and Lance were leaving for a week on a cruise, and we didn't want to spoil it for them. Everyone wished them the best as Lance's best man drove them to the airport. I was going to manage the store for her while she was gone. The chief got back to me and said a man was killed while planting the bomb. He was caught under the truck during the explosion. He couldn't be immediately identified, but his wallet was still intact, seeing it was in his back pocket. His name was Tony Fiaiti, and he was known to work for Romeo Fazio. They found the remote in Tony's car. He was probably going to make sure I was in the truck before hitting the remote. They talked to my lookout. "I was inside stacking shelves when I heard an explosion," he said. "I went to the locked rear door and saw the truck on fire. I immediately called Mr. Smith. I had no idea that anyone was under it." I received a call from Marcy, who heard the story on the radio. "Don't worry about it," I told her. "It's all taken care of and the police are on it. Just have a wonderful honeymoon. We'll be here for you when you and Lance get back." The chief asked me to not get involved and definitely not do something stupid. He would make sure there were patrols watching our area even more. I told him I wasn't afraid of Romeo, so I wouldn't start any trouble, but I would finish it if he got in my face. This was me and my family he was dealing with. It was Sunday, and I took Mary to see her kids. I even went in to meet them. At first, the receptionist told me I wasn't allowed in, but I think I gave her a look she wasn't overly happy with. "Lady, Mary is my fiancée, and these will be my future stepchildren," I said firmly. "I suggest you let me see them, or I'll get a court order and have a marshal down here in 5 minutes. I just made up the fiancé part, but it worked." "Okay, I'm sorry, but the kids aren't allowed to leave the premises," she replied. "That's fine. We will obey your rules," I assured her. "Mary just wants to see her kids. I think you can understand that." The woman softened a little and smiled. I met Mary's kids. It was funny that her son was named Bill. She called him Billy, and her daughter was Heather. They were so happy to see her. We brought them a few items they had asked her for. She introduced them to me, and they were surprised at my size. I sat down and told them I had a daughter and son also, but they were grown up now. Mary was talking to the kids, and I glanced outside in the parking lot. I saw a black car parked maybe 50 feet behind our car. I couldn't see any reason for him being there. I called the chief and asked if he had us followed. When he told me no, I mentioned the car in the parking lot. 20 minutes later, I saw a police cruiser pull up and arrest the man. The chief called me back and said the man had no valid reason to be at a kids' facility. He was searched, as well as his car. They found he had a gun with no serial numbers on it and no carrying permit, as well as some pills in an unmarked bottle. It reminded me of what they found on Mary's nightstand. They also found that he was using illegal substances at the time. There was more than enough evidence to put him away for a while. Drugs near a school and carrying a gun illegally would tie him up good. He didn't admit he worked for Romeo, but the chief and I both knew better. I didn't mention what went on in the parking lot to Mary. She had enough problems on her plate. When it was time to leave, she cried when she had to say goodbye to her kids. "We'll do our best so they can be with you," I promised them. Romeo was getting upset at losing his people. His eye for an eye wasn't working in his favor. I knew we couldn't play the game much longer. He was going after my family, my girlfriend. Yes, Mary was my girlfriend. And me. It was now Thanksgiving, and we decided to have it at our house. Mary said she would make the turkey, and Marcy would help her. I let all my employees at all 3 stores off early Thanksgiving Eve, and of course we were all closed Thanksgiving Day. They all had families to enjoy the holiday with. This time I didn't even have lookouts at the stores. The police department said they would make a few extra passes by the stores. Dinner was wonderful, but before we ate, everyone made a wish. Marcy and Lance wished for a wonderful life together. Bob and his now fiancée hoped all would work out well for them. Mary had tears in her eyes when she wished she could soon be united with her children. My mom and dad were thankful for such a wonderful family. They looked at me and asked what I wished for. "I wish that all your wishes will come true," I said. "I love you all." That was saying a lot from me. Mainly, I hoped another day wouldn't go by with Romeo still alive. We had a wonderful dinner. We all helped clean up the mess and left the leftovers on the counter to munch on. Everyone was still at the house, and we were playing board games when there was a knock on the door. Marcy got up and answered it. It was Chief Harrison. His name was Henry, but I always called him Chief. We actually played football together. "Chief, come on in. Have a drink with us," I offered. "Sorry, Bill, but I'm working." "I could use a cup of coffee," he replied. "I see your whole family is here. I have something to tell all of you." He sat down and was drinking his coffee. He looked over at Lance, who was a police officer in his department. "Lance, has everyone here now been here all day?" he asked. We looked over at Lance. "Yes, Chief, we all arrived just after noon, and no one has even left the house. Not even to go next door to the store. What has happened?" He looked over at me. "Bill, Romeo was found dead at his lounge around 3 this afternoon. There were 2 pill bottles with no prescriptions on them. They were similar to those found on Mary's nightstand years ago. We know it wasn't suicide because his hands showed signs of severe injury, likely caused by a heavy, sharp object. It was then planted in the back of his head. Everyone looked shocked but me. I very rarely showed any emotion. Since you have an alibi, I'll need to talk to all of your meat department employees tomorrow, the chief said. No problem, Chief. I'll go with you, I told him. I'm willing to say none of them would do such a thing. Bill, most of them have been convicted of numerous crimes. Yes, and every one of them has been clean as a whistle since. All have families and doing their best to walk a straight line. I've always stood up for my friends. We did go and talk to everyone who worked for me. Every one of them had good alibis and were having Thanksgiving with family and friends. After a month of trying to find out who killed Romeo, the file went in the unsolved folder. The autopsy came back as a drug overdose. How ironic. The ME said the chopped-off hands and cleaver in his head was done after death. I suggested that someone who worked for him was thinking he was getting too sloppy and decided he wanted to be the new boss. I told the chief that they probably used the cleaver to throw the blame in our direction. The chief might just want to keep his eyes open for the new boss of Romeo's mob. I took Mary to see her kids, but this time we had a court order to release the kids to Mary's custody, the only living parent. They were so happy that they would finally be with their mother. We took them back to Mary's apartment and had a little party for them. My family came over to see them. The kids were doing fine living with their mother. They didn't miss their dad at all because he hardly ever came to see them. He just didn't want Mary to have them. What was ironic was that she received Social Security for the kids. It was funny that after school they would come into the store to be with Mary and me. It reminded me so much of the old days when Marcy and Bill would do the same thing. The kids had a first real Christmas with their mother. We made sure they had plenty of gifts. I've never seen Mary so happy. I decided to go for it and pulled out an engagement ring and asked Mary to marry me. Yes, she said. We figured we would get married after the first of the year but before summer. We didn't want to interfere with Bob and Cindy's plans. They would be getting married in June. That night, Mary came over to my apartment and we shared a lovely evening together. It had to be one of my best Christmases in a very long time. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.